Hi, I'm Trey Mayo, Fire Chief of the City of Rocky Mount. Welcome to this edition of Hot Topics. Today we're filming on the fire training grounds at Nash Community College, and joining me today is Captain Carl Moore. Captain Moore is assigned to Engine 6, which is located behind the Waffle House on Wesleyan Boulevard. And Captain Moore is one of the leaders in the department for bringing us sort of up to standard, if you will, with our rapid intervention team training. And depending on where you are in the country, some departments refer to it as a rapid intervention team, some folks refer to it as a rapid intervention crew. But in the end, what a rapid intervention team or rapid intervention crew, a RIT or a RIC, what they do is they are a dedicated rescue team who does little more on the fire ground other than stand by in case there is a firefighter injury, if a firefighter becomes trapped and cannot get out of a building, if there's some other kind of firefighter emergency, that team is standing by to effect a rescue. So Captain Moore, if you will, kind of tell us about the history of rapid intervention teams, why are they important, kind of open this topic up for us.
The history of the rapid intervention team basically has always been around through our standard has focused on OSHA. OSHA mandates we have 2 personnel outside of structure to effect a rescue. Through over the past several years, that has increased through the standards. That now we kind of recommend to have 4 personnel minimum to effect a rescue of firefighters inside the structure. The history of the RIT team, it kind of goes back to the standard that we're held against as far as OSHA standards. OSHA mandates that we have 2 personnel outside of a structure to effect a rescue anytime we're in an IDLH atmosphere, which is
okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Which is immediate danger to life
okay,
or health. And that might not necessarily be a structure, it can be any type of incident, whether it be confined space or water rescue incident. We're mandated by that standard. However, over the past several years and even before then, departments have gone above that standard and mandated that they have a minimum of 4 personnel to effect a rescue in case something happens, let's say for a structure fire, for instance. And that's kind of where we are right now, where we're going in the department at the city. And through the North Carolina State Standard, they actually come up about 4 or 5 years ago and come together and put together a program that get a group of instructors together and they deliver it throughout the state. That kind of brings everybody up to standard and basically exceed that standard through the type of training and the type of information that's passed along.
Gotcha. So the state standard, if you will, exceeds what the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or in North Carolina, what the North Carolina Department of Labor requires as a minimum.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, and I may be wrong, but to the best of my knowledge, the Rocky Mount Fire Department is the only department of any size in the state that has everybody trained at what was the North Carolina standard, and I don't think that standard anymore exists, but we still use it as the basis of our training. But I think everybody in the Rocky Mount Fire Department, except the very last folks that we hired in July. This is October of 2014 today, but the folks that we hired in July, everybody except them, they are certified at the state RIT standard.
Yes, sir. Everybody in the Operations Division is qualified in that standard, which consists of three parts, which is showing how firefighters call a mayday in case they get put in a stressful situation or a dangerous situation that involves a collapse or entanglement or anything like that. Then they actually do firefighter survival, which is 16 total hours in that program, and that encompasses showing firefighters how to rescue themselves in case they get put in a situation which an entanglement, which are wires, anything like that, or a collapse. It kind of shows them how to rescue themselves. And then actually you have 16 hours of RIT, and in that RIT it actually shows teams of 4 personnel of how to go in and effect a rescue of a downed firefighter, whether it be a collapse, trap, entanglement, anything like that. But all the personnel have gone through that at the city, including several surrounding departments as well, that we help and assist in mutual aid. And currently the state has gone through and actually done away with that standard, but they have actually added the Mayday and the firefighter survival to the basic firefighter 1 and 2 standard.
Okay, so the rapid intervention training has not completely gone away in the state of North Carolina, but
no, sir.
Rather than being a separate certification, it's now incorporated with the more basic firefighter certification training.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, so you at some point in your response, you were talking about firefighters becoming trapped as a result of a collapse, and that is something that stays on our minds a lot these days because, you know, we know that, you know, I'm a numbers guy. In the past 30 years, the number of fires in the United States has gone down over 50%, but the number of firefighter deaths is up almost 70%. And I attribute that, at least in part, to the fact that truss construction has become so prevalent in the building industry. And trusses, they're light, they're cheap, they hold up well under ordinary use, you know, what we expect a building to do, which is provide shelter and a place for people to work and live. But the fact of the matter is they hold up miserably when they are exposed to fire. I mean, a truss roof assembly could collapse in 5 or 6 minutes when exposed to enough fire. And the other thing that I think has made RIT be pushed much closer to the forefront than it was years ago is the prevalence of synthetics that we now find in every building. You know, 40 years ago, your carpets and draperies and floor coverings were largely made of natural fibers, cotton and wool and things like that. And today, those furnishings are polyester, they're nylon and other synthetics. Almost everything in the typical house today started its life in an oil well, and when it's on fire, it burns just like an oil well.
Yes, sir.
And what we're seeing as a result of that is more firefighter injury and death, and buildings that are on fire collapsing much more quickly than they did 30 or 40 years ago. So there's a lot, you know, the firefighting business is more than pulling a water hose and putting some water on fire and rolling it up and going back to the fire station and waiting for the next one. And you know, what I talk about when I'm talking to the public is, you know, most people their exposure to fire is a campfire or burning leaves in a ditch, and that's a very simple fire. And that is a situation of pulling a hose, putting water on the fire goes out, you roll the hose up, and you're going about your business. But when you take that campfire, you take your pile of leaves and you put it in a box, and a house is a box, an office building is a box, and you can find that fire, and you can find that heat, and you can find that smoke. That fire behaves significantly differently than it does when it's burning in an open atmosphere where it's unrestricted. So, Captain Moore, if you will, talk about rapid intervention training and how that training was developed. I know I've been watching the guys this morning, they're kind of doing a specific drill, so kind of take us through how the certification was developed and the scenarios that you all use in the training.
Okay, the actual RIT certification requires students to go through 40 hours of training in order to get their RIT certification. And as I mentioned a while ago, that's broke down in Mayday, firefighter survival, and RIT. And that shows firefighters what to do when they get faced with a situation, what to do if they get caught in a typical situation, how to rescue themselves, and how to train crews to go rescue them. And on top of that, in order for a firefighter to become a RIT certification, they have to have that firefighter 1 and 2. Through a firefighter 1 and 2, they have to have a total of 416 hours in order to gain those certifications. So in order to get that, they have had many hours before they get to the RIT specifications. As far as develop the type of drills that we show and the type of drills that we mimic on the fire ground goes back to unfortunate loss of a brother or sister in the line of duty to death. The main ones that we typically show are called the demo drill and the Nance drill, or just two specific ones that we focus on. The demo drill was happening in Denver, Colorado, with Captain Mark Lambert. He got trapped on the second story and getting crews to get him out of a window that he was touching against. The other one's called a Nance drill, which is John Nance is a rescue from below. He actually went through the doorway and got caught in a floor collapse and went into the basement. Crews eventually got him out, but he succumbed to his injuries through the fall. So we based those, and after that, those crews went back and they, kind of focused, say, what can we do in case this happens again? And that's how we come up with some of the drills. The rest of the drills we show comes back by doing research. We get information through U.S. Fire Administration, line of duty deaths, near miss reporting, firefighter close calls, and we go back as instructors and as departments. We take the information and look at it and put ourselves in that situation. What could we do in case this happens? And by doing that, we're being more proactive on the fire ground and in our training and having our crews ready in case any type of situation happens. As you mentioned a while ago, talking about the public, and we kind of put this in the text, is when the public has an emergency, they call the fire department. When we have an emergency fire ground, we call it a RIT team. So that RIT team has to be trained and be specific to multiple standards of what to do type of rescue, of multiple types of rescue. And this kind of goes back, and all that stuff is online. If you just type it up and look at it either on YouTube or just typing up fire administration, or either just simply typing in LODD, and you can pull it up and do uncountless amounts of research and documentation on what happened. Similar to the one we had about 3 years ago with Captain Bowens in Asheville. And out of that, we kind of researched to come to that, and in NIOSH, that's why we kind of increased it. We won't have that amount of people on the fire ground to affect that type of rescue.
Right. Yeah, and the mention of Captain Bowen's death in Asheville a few years ago, I think that was 3 years ago.
Yes, sir.
The thing, I've heard Chief Burnett, who's the fire chief in Asheville, I've heard him speak about that on several occasions. And the thing that I always take away is that when Captain Bowen became disoriented and lost, the fire had been extinguished, and so the threat from the fire, that was not a factor in locating and rescuing him. But following the realization that he was disoriented and lost, they injured 7 additional firefighters rescuing him. So that kind of, that is a good example of how labor intensive it is to rescue a firefighter because of the conditions under which you're working. Firefighters a lot of times are big folks. And I mean, I'm not talking about overweight, but a guy like yourself, you're not a small guy when you're walking around in shorts and a t-shirt, and then you've got on bunker gear, you have on self-contained breathing apparatus, you're carrying tools, you're in the dark, you're falling in a basement, you're falling through the roof, you have pieces of building debris on top of you. It's quite a challenge to get you up and get you out through those sorts of conditions. So it is extremely labor intensive, which speaks about what you mentioned about having sufficient manpower, sufficient staffing personnel on the scene. So
one thing I'll add on that kind of add to the point with Asheville, it goes back into something that we actually teach in the class and has instilled in the recruits. Several years back, Phoenix Fire Department had a line of duty there with Brett Tarver, and they had multiple crews going in. They eventually got him out, but he unfortunately succumbed to his injuries. Out of that, Phoenix Fire Department with Chief Alan Bruin Sr., they've done over 200 drills. And out of that, they kind of come back to the point of where RIT was kind of coming from, going back to the history of it, it's actually called Rapid Intervention Team, but nothing about RIT is rapid. Because you have crews going through, IDLH atmospheres, collapse material and stuff like that. So out of that, they come back, it takes a minimum of 12 firefighters to rescue one. And out of all those situations, if you have a mayday at now, all rescue operation will encompass a mayday of their own. Which kind of goes back to the Brett Tarver thing. They actually had a rescue another captain out of that same situation.
Right.
So the studies have been put in place, and it kind of comes back to kind of give a rule of numbers of 12 to rescue one firefighter, 12 firefighters to rescue one.
Yep. Yeah, it's extremely labor intensive, and and at that point, with the amount of staffing we put on the scene, we have to divert what are conventionally firefighting resources toward the rescue effort, and the firefight becomes one of just keeping the fire out of the area where the downed firefighter is until we can get additional personnel on the scene. Phoenix has the luxury. Phoenix is the 7th largest fire department in the country. They can put a lot more staff on the scene than we can. They probably turn out more people at a typical residential house fire than we have working on a typical day. So the same policy or procedure doesn't work for every jurisdiction.
Yes,
so we've had to adjust based on the level of staffing that we have available to us every day. So talk about sort of the standard complement of tools and equipment that we would expect to see a rapid intervention team assemble on the fire ground, and what they would enter a building with to effect a rescue.
Most of the standard tools, which the tools that we use for rapid intervention teams, are located on ladder 30 and ladder 10. Ladder 30, which is at Station 6, and ladder 10, which is at headquarters. Out of those tools, you have a RIT pack, and out of that RIT pack, you have if a firefighter goes down and something happens to the SCBA that they have on the back, that RIT pack can go in, and you can actually hook into them and supply them an air supply, whether it be a regulator, face piece, or totally switching out altogether. You have saws, you have a search rope. Both search ropes on both apparatus are 220 foot, and allows us to either go in larger industrial structure similar to a Walmart or a Lowe's that allows firefighters the egress path out. And for a typical residential structure, we have these smaller bags which are 60-foot long, and all those are placed on a salvage cover in the front yard and a side of the structure, wherever it may be.
The A side being the one, typically the address side of the structure.
Yes, sir, typically the address side. Also, you got saws, you got extra air packs, you have a multiply tools, whether it be a Halligan bar, a pike pole, a flathead axe, a pithead axe, or what we call a New York style hook. But out of those is the situation though, they're basic firefighter 1 and 2 tools that they're taught to use in the basic firefighter 1 and 2 classes. However, in the RIT class, we encourage those individuals that participate in the class of utilizing those tools to effect a rescue, whether it may be pulling a firefighter, or if they catch themselves in a situation, we show them how to bail out of a window utilizing just only rope and a Halligan bar. So all the tools on the fire truck, pretty much everything can be used to effect a rescue, but those are just some of the basic ones that we take out. And we always tell the firefighters coming in, you know, the fire department, we're fortunate enough to have a good supply of tools and technology we have, but that technology and tools are no good unless they bring it with them. So they got to be able to utilize those tools they bring it.
Yeah, I like for when our folks get off the fire truck, I like to see them have, you know, there shouldn't be any empty hands. You know, everybody ought to have, you know, a tool, at least one tool in each hand.
Yes, sir.
So that's a point well made. So what I heard you say was so that we would expect the rapid intervention team to show up with a auxiliary air supply,
Yes, sir.
search rope, and for the benefit of the viewer, you know, you talked about Halligan bars and New York hooks and all those things, pike poles. You know, essentially you're talking about pushing, pulling, prying,
Yes, sir.
type tools. And cutting tools.
Yes, sir.
In the form of saws. How do you carry an additional hose line with you?
Additional hose lines, the way our policy is set up, we actually have a backup team in place. And if we need to have a situation we have to have a hose line, we actually bring the backup team with us. So that way, that backup team is solely focused on fighting fire if need to be, or keeping the fire in check. And those 4 individuals as assigned to that RIT team can still focus on rescuing the firefighter. Another tool that we need to add to it is a thermal imaging camera, which we call a TIC. Okay. That's very, very crucial in able to go in and locate the down firefighter if that passive device hasn't activated, and actually looking for fire and extension and stuff like that. It aids us as doing our search of that structure.
Right. The thermal imagers we use are an adaptation of military technology where they use, you know, it's I don't want to call it night vision because some night vision stuff is amplified light, is light amplification. This is actually something that can turn infrared heat signatures into something that we can see with the human eye.
Yes, sir.
And we're fortunate to have those on. I think now on. I think we've just brought everything up to where there's a thermal imager on, I think, every piece of apparatus we have in frontline service.
Yes, sir.
You know, I guess in the end what I heard was, so you have 4 people going in on the rescue team with their tools, and then you have a backup team with 3 personnel typically with a charged hose line to protect the position of the downed firefighter.
Yes, sir.
During the RIT operation.
Yes, sir.
So talk a little bit about how RIT has changed in the Rocky Mount Fire Department in the past few years.
Like I mentioned earlier, you know, we've always been mandated to be able to have a 2-in, 2-out rule based off OSHA.
As a minimum.
As a minimum. But like I said, with us, we kind of go along with that because we know through research and training it takes more than to rescue that firefighter, and we need to be as prepared as we can to kind of go in case anything happens. How it's changed, we've increased our response as far as our structure fire response by engine. That allows us to have that dedicated 4-person crew there on scene to effect a rescue. And as you mentioned earlier, you know, the fires have gone down, but the firefighter deaths has increased. This year alone, just as far as line of duty deaths, that's been a total of 63 deaths. And not all of those has come for interior structure, but the most recent one was in Houston in July of this year. They had a firefighter go down from a cardiac arrest inside the structure. The RIT crews removed him, but unfortunately he succumbed to his injuries. The reason we do that, you know, the danger's always there, as you mentioned. It's the synthetics, the trusses. When they're part of the fire department, we're going to go in and attack it. The way this stuff is changing nowadays, as far as the transitional attack, we're kind of looking at doing more stuff outside before we dedicate crews inside. Right. Through hose line replacement and ventilation, and that way it makes you a little bit better on the firefighters and even victims inside the structure. But we always have to have that crew there because it's always the unknown. We continue to send firefighters in dangerous situations that RIT cream is needed.
Right. So you mentioned something that's important. You know, when you and I were taught to fight fire years ago, decades ago, I'm afraid, you know, we were taught that you couldn't extinguish the fire. I was taught that you couldn't extinguish the fire from in the yard. You had to go in the building where the fire was, and we still do that. But we are attacking the fire from outside the structure through windows, through doors. We are using positive pressure ventilation to blow heat and smoke out. We're controlling to the best of our ability how that heat and smoke flow through the building. So the nature of fire attack has changed significantly since you and I were taught to fight fire, and it has really changed in the last several years in terms of how we think and how we approach the fire on the fire ground. And I think ultimately this is going to lead to more civilian or higher civilian survivability and fewer fire ground deaths, because we're in effect softening the target before we make entry into a building that's on fire. So as we wrap up, I have one more thing I want you to talk about, and then our able videographer Mark is going to shoot some video of some actual drills that you all are doing here today with these folks that you're training. But just give and I know one has been recently and nearby, but give one or two examples of some successful RIT deployments.
Successful RIT deployments, as you said, nearby is Greensboro Fire Department. January of this year, they had actually a 4-person crew that was involved in a roof collapse. Once the roof collapsed, they were able to call a mayday, and through the RIT teams outside and the RIT training, they were able to save all 4 firefighters. And like you said, there's been multiple situations. You know, we talked about one that unfortunately was lined due to death in Houston. Last year they had 4 involved in a structural collapse with the hotel. One that comes to mind is Mark Abbott was another successful rescue operation. He was on the 5th story of an office building. He called a mayday, and crews ultimately rescued him out of a window off of air apparatus. So there are multiple situations where firefighters was in a situation, had to call a mayday and call for that help, which is our RIT teams and rescue to come get them out. And those are just some of the recent ones that come to mind about as far as a successful.
All right. Well, thankfully they were successful, and we hope with training like you all are conducting today, we will continue to hear success stories, because firefighters do go down, they do fall through holes, they fall through roofs, they do suffer cardiac events, other things while conducting interior firefighting and search operations, and we really appreciate your leadership and dedication to this effort to get us where we are in the Rocky Mount Fire Department, and hopefully we'll never have a RIT deployment here, but if we do, I feel comfortable that our folks will be well prepared to effect that rescue, so that we don't have to deal with a line of duty death. Yes, so, Captain Moore, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Viewers, thank you for joining us on this edition of Hot Topics, and we'll see you next time. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, visit our webpage, rockymountfire.org. A lot of good information there. That's a pretty dynamic website, so please visit those social media and that website to keep up with what's going on in the Rocky Mount Fire Department. I'll see you next time.